want to make sure to thank our partners for this. So All Care Health is funding us to be able to put on this emergency preparedness forum, and then also do our other emergency preparedness work that we can talk about a little bit later. And then also to Rogue Action Center, and then correct me on my pronunciation of this, but Coalición Fortaleza?
Good. Yeah, Coalición Fortaleza. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So they are our subject matter experts tonight. So they are based in Southern Oregon. And when it comes to emergency preparedness, national disaster, and those sort of topics, they are our subject matter experts, and they will be offering up a lot of information tonight. I'll let them sort of explain a little bit more about what they do and who they are. So I will stop sharing my screen and let Elib take over.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. My name's Elib. I live here in Southern Oregon, and with the Rogue Action Center, have been working in support of fire survivors from the Almeida Fire for the last 3 years. And in this process, many of us weren't prepared for a disaster, and we've had to really learn a bunch in the last 3 years. And having gone through that experience, it's not something we want to do again. And so we've put together some emergency preparedness trainings that we've offered through the community. And I want to thank Ana Alvarez, who's here on the call, who did a lot of work to put this curriculum together. And Casey and Matt reached out to have this conversation with you all. And tonight's going to be kind of just an informal presentation, but we will be doing an in-person deep dive into this topic at the end of September in Phoenix that you will be invited to. And, there's a lot of examples out there of disaster preparedness workshops and what do you need to get prepared to go, right? You need your documents, you need your medicine, you need your pets, all of these things. And so while there are many versions of that curriculum out there, a piece that we feel is a little distinct in the training that we do is just about locating ourselves kind of on an emotional mapping framework to kind of figure out ahead of a disaster, kind of how you imagine you might react in times of emergency. And so this curriculum that we've put together is really trying to be really mindful of all of the different folks in community. And so we're really interested in learning from you all about what would be important to include in a disaster prep training for folks who are in wheelchairs, for folks who deal with disabilities. And so we want to bring some of what we're learning here today from you all and from this conversation into our training so that that training can just be a little more inclusive and effective. So we're not going to go through the whole training today. We're going to focus just on one little spot, and then we'll go into the discussion. And I'm really excited to hear and learn from you all about, what your experiences are. So, yeah, Matt, you can start the first slide.
All right, one sec. Let me get the screen up. Right, let me switch over to.
And yeah, great. So this presentation was put together by Ana and some folks at Coalición Fortaleza. And this section is really about kind of ahead of a disaster. What would you be thinking about how you might respond? And so we'll go through a few slides here if you want to move forward, Matt. So this is an exercise for you right here to just think for a moment about a time where you felt resilient in the face of adversity. And we're not going to have you journal like it says on the slide there, but just kind of close your eyes for a moment and like, what's the time when you've had to really step up in a moment of emergency or crisis? You can go ahead, Matt. So thinking about, how you've reacted in the past, we're hoping to, bring that experience into a disaster preparation conversation, because we're all going to react differently, and we might react differently in different situations. And so trying to encourage folks to just kind of picture themselves on that scale. So go ahead, forward. So there's a whole spectrum of emotions that we can feel throughout an emergency and throughout a crisis. And by trying to name them ahead of time, we're hopefully, anticipating what's coming. Go ahead, Matt. So there is a bunch of emotion words over on the side there in that graph. And maybe, after you've thought about it, maybe you can locate, how did you feel in that moment of crisis? How did you feel when there was some emergency around you? And maybe one of your words is on that graph right there. Maybe it's not included, or maybe now that you see these words, you can have a better idea of kind of where you might fall. Go forward, Matt. Yeah. So in the training that we conduct, there are really 4 different ways that we've heard people identify in the moments of a disaster. And for some people, they kick into fight mode, right? And their sympathetic nervous system is activated, and it kind of launches them forward and moves them to action. But it also can mean that there's some irritability or anger or aggression that might come up as your nervous system is reacted. If you're one of those folks who's a fighter like me, that's kind of how I tend to react. For some folks, it's a flight response, which is also your sympathetic nervous system, right? Telling you that something's dangerous and you got to get out of here. And so for some people, it brings up anxiety and fear. There are moments of panic, of worry that can happen for those who react in that flight way. And, there's no judgment about anybody reacting in any of these ways. We all, react differently. And so, there's not a right or wrong way to handle something like this. It's just good to know where we are. Another way folks react is they freeze. They just kind of deer in the headlights moment. And that's the dorsal vagal nerve that is kind of shutting them down. And there's a moments of stuckness, of collapse, of immobilization and spacing out that some people experience in emergency. And until we did this training, this other way to react wasn't something I was familiar with, but to fawn, to sort of, people please and to avoid conflict. And one big way that manifests is it prioritizes others' needs over your own. And so often folks in crisis will not really be thinking about themselves and be worried about their friends and family more, or their pets more. And so if you're one who might be someone who's fawning, hopefully this will, get you to be just recognizing that in yourself and prepared for it if you have to react in the future. You can go ahead, Matt. And forward there as well. So yeah, just here, take a minute to kind of imagine where you would be on this scale right here. And, some of you might be, between fight and freeze, some of you directly like all the way down on flight in the very bottom there. But this is kind of a good way to visualize how people are reacting. Go forward. Yeah, so these are just some of the questions that we wanted to bring into this space. And, I'm really excited to dig deeper into the actual physical emergency preparedness workshop, which it really goes well in person. And so at the end of September, when we do this, it would be great for those of you who are local or who are able to make to travel, to get more into like what would be the things to think about in to prepare me for an emergency and prepare me to respond in crisis. But I think that the training that we do in this real focus on this emotional kind of preparedness that we don't often talk about, we don't often think about, feels to us like it's missing from some of those other disaster prep workshops out there. And so I was really grateful for Casey and Matt to invite me in and invite us to share with you. And I think that a conversation here around disaster preparedness within this community, I'm really excited to hear kind of just what comes. And so are there folks that have any questions for the trainers, or are we kind of, is there a moderated question session, Matthew, or?
Yeah, I think people could raise their hands or put them in chat and we could call through. Be a great way to start. Thanks so much. Like, this is such a different take on disaster preparedness that I've never really thought about. So and it makes so much sense of like, for an individual, like, where are you on this? And like, because knowing that is helping you build your own personal like plan, knowing how you're going to react.
I'm on my phone. I can't raise my hand, but I got two things that come to mind. So when you were talking about the stress responses, like in the slides and kind of it's almost like a crosshatch of the 4 different emotions. I would venture to say that instead of being like a clock and where you fall in between that, I would be like, it's almost like a blob, like a circle. Like you might fall more into a fight or you might fall more into a fawn. Like for me personally, it's not one response. It's mentally, I'm one response. Physically, I'm a totally different response. Like my body will freeze in a moment of crisis. But then it's like once I'm dealing with the emotion, then I can actually act. And my mind always goes towards fight. Like, how can I help somebody else? What can I do? Even though I'm in the situation I'm in, that's just how my mind reacts. But my body just is like, like freezes.
Yeah.
The other thing too that I was going to just mention, like with this, I know that you guys are planning for the meeting in September, which obviously like maybe next year, I don't know if it could be like sooner in June, before, we're in this situation. Cause like right now we're in season of Almeida Fire again, like right now.
Yeah, it's true. And yeah, this curriculum, we started at the beginning of the summer. And
right. No, it's awesome.
Yeah, we're going to be building on it. So yeah, making this available again early next year for folks who weren't able to come to this, we would be absolutely willing to do that.
And I think that's awesome that you guys are recording so that at least you can get it up on, social media platforms, whatever. So it's like, at least it gets people that are in our situation thinking about, oh yeah, it is that time of year.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. I love that, Cody, that, we can have different reactions in the same moment, right? And that blob does float. And, I think for a lot of us, our brain does behave differently than our body sometimes. And so I think that, really naming that's really accurate. Yeah, I appreciate that.
I would like to add a note, like with that concept of us having different reactions. I noticed like from a disabled perspective, when it came time to pack and evacuate for Alameda, like I felt mentally like, let's do this. And then I kept being caught up with oh, but I can't lift the cooler in the car. And so I've just noticed, it was just kind of a comment. Like I just noticed that I realized in that moment that there was a lot more preparedness I needed to do as a disabled person, for like a lot more pre-planning.
Yeah, like to go off of that handle, like for me, especially like everything that like an able-bodied person could like grab some stuff that's really important and throw it in the car and go. Like for me and my disability, like that stuff is either really hard or really slow. And so in an emergency situation, it's hard because you have to start crossing things off the list that you're not going to be able to get to because everything takes longer and it's harder and all that. Even just getting in the vehicle, you know, it can be like transfers or ramps and all that takes so much longer that like, yes, that's where like being extra prepared is super important in this community.
Yeah, I think, you know, just listening to the things that you've all brought to the table already, there are, you know, some pieces that would be really great to brainstorm for this preparedness training coming up. But also just really maybe there's a chance when either through this conversation or as you all are talking further down the road about preps, like creating a document that could be shared around within that community for just things that come to mind that might not be on everybody's radar, right? Like Hannah and your cooler, like that might not be a, you know, everyday consideration for you, but it would be good to kind of have thought through it ahead of time a little bit.
That's a good idea. And I don't know, Matt and Casey, if you're already planning on having like a list of resources, or like I figured you are, but I remember my biggest thing that came up was, will I be able to go to the bathroom where we're going? And I could not. I was lucky I was able to go home early the next morning, but like even just trying to just have that stuff on our radar. I mean, it'd be so important to have it all written out so it's on your radar before panically on your radar.
I'm curious as like, especially with all care being a big part of this, is if like if it could be pushed that, you know, with insurances providing like a 15-day like extra resources, like extra catheters, extra medication that would get you through, like depending on whatever your situation is, if they would allow you like a one time a year, like an extra 15-day span, like a 2-week span of medications, catheters, whatever, so that you could have a pre-planned ready to go bag.
That's very, you know, it's very important because once you're off your own property, you don't know where they're gonna put you or where you can go and stuff like that. So it's always great to have a bug out bag, you know, like keep a bag that has like a couple, you know, 2 weeks worth of medical supplies, because especially with like me, I have an ostomy bag and stuff like that. So it's very important that I'm able to have those things if I ever have to leave, because honestly, you don't know. You know, you just don't know. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's the thing, is if insurance could provide like an extra 2 weeks worth of supplementals, then you're not tapping into your resources that you need. Right. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Cody, yeah, that'd be a great topic to explore with them.
So yeah, that makes me think, do you know, like I know people were getting evacuated to the expo. Are there committees and pre-planned, like people who are on top of it when a disaster starts, they've set up a thing?
Yeah,
I think the Red Cross would be something. Sorry, you can feed into it.
Yeah, the Red Cross, it is one of those resources. But Jackson County disaster preparedness, there is a an officer here in Jackson County and one in Josephine County as well, who are in charge of emergency response. And there's been a lot of learning that happened post Almeida about where people evacuate, how people are evacuated, how emergency information is communicated, how our community is notified when there is a fire. All of this has, we didn't have to do it before. And so the community is now kind of building out that plan in a more robust way. And included in that are the idea of not just the expo being an evacuation center, but where are smaller little resilience hubs that can be in different communities that can already ahead of a disaster have supplies on hand, be able to shelter people, work with the Red Cross to, shelter folks out of school. And Rogue Action Center right now is working on a project for the Talent middle school and elementary school for it to become a resilience hub. And it would have energy independence for 7 days. So there would be battery storage to, keep people's wheelchairs charged and such like that in the case of a disaster. And the state of Oregon is investing a lot in some more of this preparedness. And there was a bill that was just passed in the legislature to fund these resilience hubs and to begin to bring these resources instead of, getting from Talent to Central Point. And the expo was a huge nightmare for a lot of people. If there were resilience hubs more locally, it would be a lot more effective. And so I see the state, I see the counties, I see communities doing a lot of work right now to do all of that better.
Is there any, sorry, go ahead, Anna.
Can you do an email introduction with some of the resiliency center leaders and OSCI? Because it'd be nice to just check in with them about, is there going to be a handicapped toilet? Sorry, bathroom's always on my mind because that's the hardest part. But like, and is there a way we can get with their supplies, boxes of catheters and that sort of thing?
Yeah. We'd love to loop you in as these conversations progress. The Phoenix Talent School District is a big part of that conversation. And the project is funded through this national program called Energy Storage for Social Equity. So it's looking at disaster preparedness with a real eye on accessibility and equity issues, and making sure that counties are thinking about this for, the just huge variety of needs that are out there in communities.
Cool. Great. That would be awesome to connect.
Yeah, definitely.
Cody, I think you're up and then I'll go next.
Is there any idea of how many people in our community are what kind of number are we looking at? Is it 5,000? Is it 7,000 between Ashland to GP? Do we have an idea? Because just with you talking about the power stations and the chargers, how many people bailed out of their houses and forgot their charger? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually something that an organization, the Coed, which is Community Organizations Active in Disaster, they have a disaster registry that is being built so that ahead of a disaster, first responders and emergency personnel can know, in this park, there's several seniors who don't drive. There's a couple folks in a wheelchair. There's someone down here who, has 10 kids and they are going to need help, whatever it happens to be. So that disaster registry is being built now as well. It's something that has existed in other communities. And so there's some good examples of it out there that some folks locally are trying to organize.
And just a side note, you can typically access those if you're working through the DHS. You can access that through your case manager. I just learned that recently. Just a side note.
Yeah. So during the Alameda fires, when people evacuated to the expo, there were people that showed up that in that moment of panic that did not bring their power chair or mobility scooter or charger. And so when they got there, and their scooter died, they had no like mobility. And so luckily somebody had reached out and I donated some down there to them, just to get them to be able to charge down there. But like that's one of those things that for power chair users that needs to be like on the top of their list. Because if your chair dies, then you're
I
stuck.
wonder if I could tap into, obviously being with New Motion, if I could tap into something with when something like that kind of does hit the fan, if we could provide some sort of like a technician or have batteries or chargers, something like that,
Yeah.
just to kind of help out in that situation.
That's awesome. I would love to have that conversation. Based on what we learned responding to Almeida, we have a truck and a couple of storage units that have a lot of the supplies that are needed on hand in the first hours and days after a fire. And we do have a small generator, and we're getting one of those Jackery solar generator things, which are so cool. But to have a couple batteries on hand, or to have just the universal chargers on hand, would be awesome. And yeah, I'd love to talk about that.
Elib, let's talk with Cody. Let's make sure the truck has at least 1 to 2, because the chargers are universal between chairs for the most part. So let's definitely get that rolling.
Well, and honestly, you're getting into the realm too of like, I'm sure people had to bail just without the chairs at all. And obviously New Motion is set up in communities to have rental chairs. And I mean, when you're talking a situation like that, having a resource where somebody could step in and it's like, hey, I got this guy, yeah, he's in my car, but I can't get him out.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love the idea of New Motion kind of having its own disaster, well, not its own, but linked out, but a disaster preparedness plan. I think that's great. And I bet they would support that with you. I mean, well, you and your company would support it. Oh, you're muted, Cody.
There we go. I was just gonna say, once this video gets like produced or a link to it, definitely if somebody can send it to me, and I will see if I can make the powers that be help out, or at least start the conversation.
Will do. Yeah. Another big thing in our community is transportation. For some people in our community, they don't own an accessible vehicle and they rely on public transportation. And so when it comes to this emergency situation, they're like, I don't know what they can do to be able to be evacuated. I know there's a disaster registry for every county. But I don't know if they have like accessible transportation and stuff. So that needs to be like a very big topic of everybody's like individual plan. Is like, how do you get out of somewhere if you don't have transportation?
Yeah, and when we do the full training with you all, one of the things is creating a personal plan, and it's a piece of paper that goes in a binder and can help just pre-think about a lot of this stuff ahead of time. I put the link to our DIRT team, the disaster relief team website there, Cody, in the chat, and for everyone else as well, so you can just kind of get a sense of what we've done at Rogue Action Center to kind of be working ahead of this. Anna, you have a hand.
Yeah, I just did, as we move forward in the for our in-person training, there are aspects in the training which I feel is important to name right now, where we talk about yourself to kind of check in with neighbors and see if there is like any transportation needs, because we saw that a lot, especially in mobile homes. Folks that are a lot older that didn't have transportation or just couldn't make it to their car. So it is somewhat worked into our curriculum, into just kind of like maybe having someone within the community to like be like, hey, in case of an emergency, I'm gonna need transportation plan that ahead, and to have someone that knows that you need transportation, or that you know that you're gonna have a little more of a hard time evacuating on your own, then so that it's easier for someone in your community to, when emergency personnel come, you know, quickly direct it to where the help is needed, and or be that one person that helps those folks in the community that need more help. But there was a question that I did have for the rental chairs. Would this is this something that folks have like their own like wheelchair, like the ones that you use, or and they just take that one and leave like an electrical wheelchair that might need replaced, or is this like a, you know, they just left everything and need help getting another one?
Well, I live in the Grass Pass area, and I have my own wheelchair van. So if you're in the Grass Pass area and you need extraction, you get a hold of me, and then we'll see. You know, definitely try to help you and anybody we can actually to get out of there. Because I know when something like when a fire happens up here in Grass Pass, Ready Ride is very, very busy, and they don't, you know, they just you can't have enough vans. You know what I mean? So if something like that happens in your Grass Pass area, you get a hold of me, and my van is available to any and everybody that that needs it. So yeah, that's not a problem, you know, because that's a big, you know, I live at the base of a mountain, and you know, I got a lot of trees around me, so I know that if there's a major fire, you know, there's that chance of being trapped or whatever. And you
Which
know,
almost happened last year.
yeah, it almost happened last year. So, but yeah, definitely for sure. If you're in my area, you give me a call, or even if you're not in my area, you know, and I can get my van out to you, I will, without a doubt. You know, it's all part of my caregiver, and have somebody just come pick you up and help you move. So yeah,
This
that's
is why it's so important to be linked with community, you know, so we have each other on each other's radar.
Right.
right.
And you know, that's what we found, you know, despite a lot of good thinking by county officials, by cities, by our local governments, we weren't prepared. And honestly, there's going to be people that fall through the cracks in no matter how well prepared we are. And so the DIRT project and the disaster relief team is really, you know, counting on folks like Darren, who are going to be just community members who are going to step in the moment, and building that network of support outside of the systems, outside of the agencies, where we can really you know, have that extra layer of support that we might not have access to otherwise. And that in a disaster, that's a particularly those communities are particularly important.
It's vital. You know, it's vital. Like,
yeah,
because there's nothing scarier than well, especially where I live, like fire, and you can't get out. You know what I mean? So that's it's really scary, and I deal with that, you know, a lot, because I don't, you know, fire, and I'm here by myself most of the time. It's like, man, you gotta get out, and you gotta get away, and so, and then, you know, the thing is, you know, when there's a bunch of fires and stuff, everybody's spread thin, so you got to reach out to those people that can help you. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, just you know, like I said, I got a van. It can only hold, well, it might be able to hold two if we swing them sideways, but yeah, yeah,
You need
I'm
that
here.
ramp limousine.
Yeah, yeah. I'm basically here if you guys need it, so just let me know.
Emails in the comments section. Darren and myself is there.
Yeah.
How feasible, and this is just me spitballing, but how feasible would it be to create not, you know, not like a 911 or but like a dig, you know, like when the 811s or the 611s? I mean, is there I as small as this community is, I get it, but I mean, like when somebody hits their point and they need to call those numbers, is there like a quick, like, has that been thought about? Is like a 3-digit number or something that can be created?
There might be, not that I know of.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We should look into that and see about creating one, because Wi-Fi isn't necessarily going to be an option
Nope.
Right.
at that point.
And I mean, you could see it even when the Almeida fires were going, like, you know, a lot of the platforms like Facebook were filming it live and stuff. You could see how important the satellite towers were, because they were protecting those things at like all costs.
Yep.
Elib, do you know if, oh, sorry, the Disaster Registry has the capacity for like accessibility related stuff too?
That's a good question. I know that I don't know how that worked post Almeida Fire, but I know that now that is a really big part of the conversation. And I think the Coed, the Community Organizations Active in Disaster, will be a part of creating this registry with the county. And it just got a bunch of funding, and there's actually going to be a half-time paid director of that organization now. And so they're going to be reaching out into the greater community to get nonprofits and individuals involved. And so, you know, you all going to those meetings early on and participating in that space, I think could really help drive that conversation. And, you know, there's some, you know, this is on everybody's minds in Oregon right now. And so there's funding out there in the legislature for stuff like this. And, you know, hearing from you all who are, you know, have all of this lived experience with having dealt with Almeida, I think would be invaluable in that space. And so when that starts getting formed, let's make sure that you know about when those meetings are and such.
Please.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like, you know, that 3-digit number. I mean, if this really starts to take traction, it could be a national thing. You know what I mean? Like as 911 is, maybe it could be a sticker that all chairs come with that number with a sticker on it. You know what I mean? So it's like some of us that don't have the capacity, mental strength or whatever, even though that somebody else could possibly see that on the chair and be like, hey, in case of emergency, dial XYZ.
That'd be a good idea, actually. Maybe get something like that.
Because when emergencies are going on, 911 is inundated with calls left and right. So I mean, if it's a direct disability accessibility thing, then I don't know, maybe it could be something.
I think there is something behind that. Something Darren said when you were speaking on being home alone occasionally, is the Elib, do you know, is there anything written up on what do you do if you cannot leave your property? Like, is it best to sit in the hose? Should you get in your shower? Like, I don't know. Is there information on that?
You know, there are different schools of thought around that. And so I think that, you know, that's not something that I've heard explicitly, like this is what the best thing to do is. I think that that's a really good question and something to dig into. And, you know, I wonder if anybody finds some information about what those recommendations are, let's try and bring that to the training and be able to fold that in.
Just to pitch in on the question that was made here, I think that's a great question. And although we don't have the answer for that in our presentation, we are planning on talking to the fire department just after the Alameda fire. What were some of the things that were easy for them based on like housing and whatnot, and like what could folks do? And so like any questions like these that, you know, like what to do if you can't leave your home, what to do if you can't find transportation is welcomed. If you guys want to write it down in the chat so I can keep it on the notes, so that when we meet with the fire department, so that we can include this in the presentation, that would be really helpful for us and for everyone as well. So yeah, or I can put my email in here, and any questions can be sent to my email as well.
And I know some people are also in the situation where their chairs won't go through like the main door, the main threshold. So like another thought is they coming from the fire service, like they have placards, and sometimes they offer placards like, hey, there's this many people in the house, there's this many animals in the house. I wonder if there's like some sort of placard that could be made as well, that, you know, I don't know, like if something like that states, you know, that really can catch the attention, or, you know, the eye of somebody that's outside from the street. Like if you flip the handicap sign and is bright orange or that bright neon yellow, you know what I mean, that really draws like and allows people to say like, oh, there's a person in there that can't get out of their house.
Well, I think
great
we're
idea.
making the especially trailers for people like us, to where we have a ramp and the door space that we can get into and stuff
I
like.
understand. There's those situations where people have that stuff, but there's also a lot of people that they have chairs and they can maneuver inside their house, but they can't get through the main door.
No, that's what I'm saying. We need to have some kind of sign that says, hey, you know, that this is for handicapped people, paraplegics, quadriplegics, whatever. We need to be able to access those trailers, you know, because we can't access, you know, we can't go up steps, you know, stuff like that. So, yeah, I agree. It needs to happen. So,
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I remember when I was newly injured, signing up, I believe through my home care health at the time. I'll have to look into it and remember, but I was on a certain registry and there was specific notes, like there's a person in this room who possibly can't get out of the bed on her own. So I'll look into what that was, and then it'll be worth looking into how do we improve on it and make a system that's not just specific to like your home health provider or whatever. Yeah, this is a great idea, guys.
okay. Very good, very good. We're done here. How is this? Oh, pie. You thought I look like I weigh 600 fucking pounds. I know, right?
Ethan, can you think of any questions for your training that you have for this community that you'd like to explore more?
Yeah, you know, a battery and a charger are things that we've thought of including in our supplies. But, you know, what is a little bag of tools that might be needed on a wheelchair? What wrenches might be needed? You know, what would be like just a very simple set of equipment that would be good for us to have around so that, you know, we could keep people in their chairs. So, you know, if you all want to think about that, I'd love to hear about that.
The first thing that comes to mind I would say a set of like Allen wrenches.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the chairs screws are Allen wrenches usually.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're mostly, you know, standard. I don't think they go very much into metric. And the other thing that like pops in my head with that is like tire repair stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
One, you know, somebody that uses, you know, as a pair that has tires and tubes that are air filled. Like, I mean, it's a very basic, you know, bike thing, but
Sure.
yeah, that is definitely something.
Great, love it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, if the other thing that I think about is if you are going to a shelter or something like that, like what the sleeping situation is. Like if you're going to a high school and like you're planning, like you might be there for a couple nights, like is there cots and like appropriate like sleeping pads and stuff like that? Because, you know, something we deal with a lot is like pressure sores and stuff from like laying on our side overnight, and like we can't just lay on like a straight cot. We need some sort of like sleeping pad. So that's another thing I think about if we're talking about the going to shelter someplace, is what that sleeping situation looks like. The other thing that I've sort of been thinking about as the discussion goes on is what it like. So it's been very sort of a Southern Oregon, specific discussion, but thinking about more broader, what is there a recommendation for if you are somebody with a disability, like how to connect with your local services like ahead of time? Is there something like that can be like, you call up your fire department, be like, hey, if there's an emergency, this is my situation, is there a way to register, or a recommendation for hey, you should contact this department or this organization or this individual ahead of time?
Right. Yeah, that's part of what the Coed is hoping to build out, is to be able to have that information somewhere that's accessible for a variety of situations. And I know that Coeds aren't specific to Southern Oregon. They're in every county in Oregon, actually, some more active than others. And I think that that's a question that a lot of the Coeds are asking in general right now. So, down the road, maybe there is something that, your address can get pulled up and there's a drop down, here's a tab with X, Y, and Z people and an organization that is familiar with, the needs that this person might have, etc. So,
well,
who's our local Coed?
Just to add to that, it's coming from a company that works with a lot of disabled people. You'll quickly find that even though something is in a registry like that, or they have an address on file, is they move and they forget to update. So if, for instance, say somebody has a file created like that and they call for an emergency, yet they don't have the right address on file.
Right.
So there's a lot of due diligence too, and what accountability, self accountability too, that's gonna have to be taken into account. I guess that could be a check when the call gets made, hey, are you still at this address?
And including that in the kind of binder that we have in our training with okay, here's my disaster plan, maybe having a page in there that can help remind people to keep that information up to date. And so that it's that booklet that we hope we never have to use and need, but if there's a page in there saying hey, have you remembered to change your address or update your new phone number or whatever it is.
So maybe that could be a yearly, if you're getting a yearly preparedness plan put together with, say, that 2-week preparedness packet, hey, this is your yearly time, just follow up, and if your insurance or anything needs updated, update your address too.
Yeah, like a yearly check-in on your go bag and a yearly check-in on your binder. Yeah, totally.
100%, because meds are going to go bad, caths are going to go bad.
Elim, who's our local Coed?
Well, right now, Mark Peterson has been the chair of the Coed, but it's been an all-volunteer position. And so with some funding that just came through the state, there's a half-time director who's going to be working through the long-term recovery group here in Jackson County. And that person, they're interviewing for that position right now. And so many of the members of the Coed that have been active here in Southern Oregon are members of different faith-based communities a lot of times. And the Mormon Church was pretty active previously in the Coed, but now that there's going to be a professional paid staff person, I think the Coed is just going to kind of take off and hopefully just get a lot more involvement from all over the community.
And what's Coed stand for again?
Community Organizations Active in Disaster.
Perfect. So for the people that attended today, I think Matt and I could get out the local Coeds to everybody that's in attendance. That way, everybody can start exploring locally what their options are in their area.
Yeah, and thanks, Tamara. The Multnomah County's Coed, I know that they're very active. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I just as we were talking, pulled up the list of Coeds for Oregon. So
Yeah,
yeah,
Perfect.
that is definitely something we can post pretty easily.
And if for you to be involved in those conversations all over the state, with your membership everywhere, that would be really cool for, I think that there's just so much power in having people with lived experience making the suggestions in places of power. Anna, I hope you don't mind that I share, but Anna lost her home in the fire, and when Anna shows up in a room, people listen, and she's been able to have a powerful voice in how we're going to do this next time. So I think you all have a real opportunity to jump on it. And the state, our representative down here, Pam Marsh, is talking about future legislation in this coming year that's going to make even more funding available for disaster prep all over the state. So things are going to get better. There's a lot of people paying attention now, and you all have a really important voice to bring into that.
Anywhere that you could plug us in organizationally, or recommend that we plug ourselves in, I would love that. And I really look forward to continue working on this subject with you too, because I think there's a lot of room to grow, and I think there was a lot of learning that happened with the Almeida Fire.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really stoked to be, working alongside y'all.
Yeah, as I look at the sort of Coed website, there's opportunities to join committees and stuff like that. Looks pretty easy that to easily add a voice for the disability community.
Cool. A lot of the firefighters who were assigned to the Almeida Fire, it was quickly determined that the fire was just too hot and fast to really even try and fight it. And I think it's absolutely heroic how emergency personnel shifted to evacuating people from these mobile homes. And the fact that, I heard several stories of, 8 firefighters getting this one chair out of a trailer in Phoenix, and, things like that. I think that the first responders were just incredible in this instance, that, that more people weren't, that more lives weren't lost is actually pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that is. Does anybody else have any thoughts or questions or comments?
I do not, but this has been an incredible discussion. A lot of topics and areas came up that I hadn't previously thought of.
Yeah, and I think as we move forward, this is not like a one and done conversation. This is going to be, as Elib and Casey mentioned, we're going to have a in-person sort of training sort of forum in Southern Oregon, but also, as an organization, we're going to start building out that resource along with the help of Rogue Action Center, on our website for these things that we've talked about, these resources, these connections that people can go to. So it's kind of a one shop all, sort of site for people with disabilities that, if they have these questions, if they were they want to get, registered with a county or something like that, they can go to the website and find those resources. So I think it's another thing, as we move forward, if you have continued questions, something that pops into your head to, connect with us and ask those, so we can, either figure that out, get that question to you, or add it to, if we're oh, well, that's a great thing to think about, we can add that to the website,
Cool.
in our resource list.
Oh, one quick comment with the Alameda Fire. I realized it's good to have segmented go bags. What can you fit in a car? Maybe that's your immediate bag and a week's supply, and then maybe you have mementos. So I had 3 segments, stuff that I would get rid of, the memory stuff, and then there goes my 7-week supply, or my 2-week supply, and then down to the go bag. But anyways, I'll include that more in the in-person one.
No, yeah, that's great info. Tamara, I see your question in chat. It is in progress. Rogue Action Center might have one. She asked if either of these groups have a suggestion for a disabled go bag. And so that we are currently actively working on that, and I will make sure it gets out to everybody that attended once it's fully put together, but it is in the process. And a lot of this feedback from tonight will definitely go into the thought process on it.
Yeah, one of the things we want to do is moving forward is also, it's, you know, along that line is creating something that sort of a you know, a checklist that people can stick on their fridge and be like, so if they have to go in 30 minutes, you know, they can look through this, you know, and find something that's general, but also something that's specific to people with disabilities, you know. So those things like you know, like as we talked about, people that left quickly that didn't have their charger for their chair, like that is something that is very specific to the disability community. So it's like, you know, there's the general things, but then there's that specific thing that's like, hey, make sure to grab your charger, make sure to grab, you know, anything you need for your bowel care or your catheters or stuff like that.
I have a link that I'm going to drop in the chat here. I dropped the entire disaster prep training that we do, that we just excerpt that little bit. I put the whole thing there if you would like. And
That's
then
awesome.
this next one is something that Jackson County put together. It's called Get Ready Rogue. And inside of it, at the very back, are several different versions of different go bags. And it's fantastic. It's a huge, rich resource. And so that Get Ready Rogue website right now is in English. You can, if you're a Spanish speaker, go up to the top corner and there's a translate button. But we're hoping to get the county to have printed versions in Spanish available too for this next year. And, you know, in future conversations, you know, as the community down here engages in this conversation, getting Jackson County to include something about, you know, a go bag that's specific for folks with disabilities, I think they would be open to that. And the emergency
I think it's going to
manager,
be huge trying to get insurance to kick in with that and help.
yeah, that would be great. Holly Powers is the emergency manager down here in Jackson County, and she will be involved in those Coed conversations moving forward. So
Very cool. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely want to have some conversations with them. That's awesome.
yeah.
Any other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, thoughts, comments, or like areas that we need to think about more in the future. I think that's another thing we could think about.
Yeah, this has been great. And you know, if you all want to look through the full training and just see like if there's any things that come up for you that would be like, oh, in this section, let's make sure that we include another slide about X, Y, or Z, you know. And so any of the thoughts or suggestions you have about how to make this training more robust and specific, Anna and I would love to hear that from you all.
Very cool. Yeah. Anything that comes through, I'll definitely get your way.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to, oh, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, I look forward to this as, you know, a continued conversation.
Yes.
Like, I think this is such a huge topic that hasn't been well thought out and discussed in the disability community. So like, I really appreciate this, you know, this like I feel like we've only touched on a very small piece of it. And like, this is going to be a continued thing. And like, I mean, I think this goes beyond just Oregon. Like this is a nationwide, like this is a conversation that needs to be had. So I really appreciate, you know, this, like, I feel like it's the beginning of a much larger projects, larger, you know, thought process that's going to happen. And something, especially as, you know, as global warming progresses, as something that's going to become more and more relevant. So,
well, and I feel like too, like sometimes these things get highlighted just because it's so fresh, you know what I mean? Like, I'm curious how just a little further south of us, like I can't remember the name of that fire that was like
in weed.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
weed fire. Like, what did they learn? Like, what did they do for the community? And
Right.
now that scar has somewhat kind of healed, is there still things in step for preparedness for that, or did it just kind of,
Yeah,
now that everything's healed, everyone, it's off everybody's mind?
Totally. We've been in touch with folks from Paradise in California
That's the one I was thinking.
in Santa Rosa. And so those fires were 7 and 5 years ago. And so people here are learning so much from where communities are now based on what their experience was. We've been able to really learn about, like, what are the housing challenges that your community faced 3 years after the fire. And so to continue to have and be part of that community has just been such a rich place to learn about how we can do things better here in the future. Oregon
So I'm just curious, like, are they prepared, ready now? Like, do they have go bags? Are these things that
that conversation's happening down there. My brother lives down in Santa Rosa, and like, their fire is still so present on everyone's mind. I think, we were all pretty traumatized down here. I don't think we're ever going to forget it. I don't think we're going to like just move on.
Behind me, that structure you see, that's rebuilt because the original one burnt down in the Alameda Fire.
There you go.
All affected. I'm very thankful for the Rogue Action Center and what you guys have done and will continue to do for the fire relief. You're a wonderful resource. It's been great to learn more about you.
Yeah,
thanks,
and I think is an important thing Cody brought up is like, learning from others outside of like, our communities that we kind of been talking about fire specifically, but there's so many other emergency situations that might, I grew up in northern Washington where floods were quite a thing, so we're starting to pull in, experiences and, the sort of and resources, for other types of either natural disasters or, emergency situations, and pulling that into, our resources and, website and all that sort of thing.
And, it's kind of fortunate, well, not fortunate. It's kind of interesting that Oregon hasn't done this before, right? Because now they're building it from scratch. Yeah. And you can include a disability lens in something new, maybe easier than trying to build it into something that's been, pretty, that's been around for forever. It's like
that's so true. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even just thinking about like, what is it? Like the average temperature in Phoenix right now is like 115 degrees or something like that. Like that to me is like, that's a natural disaster.
That is, absolutely.
I mean, how do you deal with that as somebody with disability? So totally. Like pulling in those other things.
Absolutely. And, power outages in the winter and the cold snaps that we have, like those are natural disasters. And, smoke. The real likelihood is that our disaster relief team will be helping people with smoke more frequently than anything else. And how can we get air purifiers into the hands of people with respiratory illness and, things like that? Those are the more likely events. Yeah.
Well, I just love what you guys are doing with this at the Rogue Action Center with this, and like your take on emergency preparedness is such a unique twist that like really wasn't out there, and I really love the thoughtfulness of it and your guys' willingness to partner and share and bring it out to the community. It's been awesome.
Yeah, I really want to shout out Coalición Fortaleza for being such a huge part of the developing of this curriculum, and as this huge partner with us as we continue this. So yeah, thanks, Casey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I look forward to the ongoing conversations on this and being a part of this in whatever way we can.
Yeah, let's connect here and do a little debrief from this and maybe map out some things that we will bring into the training. I think we said September 25th was the day. I think it's a Monday.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, Anna and I would love to meet with you and figure out how we can make this just the best we can.
Perfect. Yeah. And then and I do think it's a great idea that Cody had of doing this again late spring next year.
Yeah.
and maybe doing it in person and a more like refined virtual one for the people up north that can't attend in person.
Yeah, great. I love it.
Cool. Well, thank you all. I appreciate everybody's attendance and everybody's input.
Yeah, this is great. I agree.
Yeah, nice to
Thank
meet you
you,
all.
everyone.
Yeah.
Good night.
Yeah, have a
Good
good
night.
night.